Good afternoon and welcome. This is Spotlight Africa, and we're coming to you live from the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. I am Uyai MM. Today on Spotlight Africa, United States President Donald Trump announced a surprise summit with five African nations. Madagascar's president in Paris to discuss disputed Indian Ocean islet. President killed in Liberian coup to be reburied in own grave. ECOWAS calls for restraint in violent protests in Togo. Plus, 3 days of protests leave seven dead in Togo. We'll bring you details of these stories and more in a moment. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. First on Spotlight Africa, United States President Donald Trump will meet with the leaders of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal from the 9th through to the 11th of July. The meeting comes as a surprise, although some analysts have taken it as a continuation of intensifying American diplomatic efforts towards the African continent. Just last month, the White House notably brokered a peace deal between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, putting a preliminary end to hostilities and Rwandan backed rebel groups fighting DRC's troops in the east of the country for several months. While a bilateral meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in May went down with more tension, with some describing Trump ambushing the South African leader. The upcoming mini summit next week is likely to focus mostly on trade relations and commercial opportunities. Trump has made increasing business ties a key objective of relations with the African continent, which he wants to substitute for humanitarian programs and development aid. Plans for a wider US Africa summit have also been announced for September, although nothing has been confirmed so far from either side. In another development, Madagascar's President Andrew Rajoelina arrived in Paris on Monday for discussions with French President Emmanuel Macron on the future of the long disputed scattered islands. The five tiny islets, with a total area of just 43 square kilometers in the Indian Ocean, were part of Madagascar when it was a French colony. They were split off when the island nation gained independence in 1960. Madagascar wants them back. France, however, is determined to maintain ownership of the uninhabited, I beg your pardon, but strategic islands, which are protected ecologically sanctuaries. Not only because of the ecological and symbolic importance, but also because of the control they offer over vast maritime zones in which resources. These tiny islands grant France jurisdiction over a staggering 640,000 kilometers square of marine space, roughly 6% of its total maritime domain, full of fish and possible gas reserves. The trouble is that for Madagascar, they carry symbolic weight and it has long contested their detachment. Meanwhile, United Nations vote in 1979 and 1980 agreed that the islands should be reintegrated with Madagascar. Away from that, Liberia's former President William Talbot is set to receive a symbolic reburial on Tuesday, 45 years after he was murdered during a coup, and his body believed to be dumped in a mass grave. 10 days after the president's killing, following trials by a kangaroo court, 13 of his cabinet were stripped, tied to stakes, and then executed by a firing squad on a beach next to an army barracks in the capital, Monrovia. None of the 14 corpses has been found, but each man is due to get a state burial at a ceremony attended by President Joseph Boakai and other dignitaries. The event is seen as an act of reconciliation and part of the process of the country coming to terms with its violent recent past. The 12th April 1980 coup in which 28-year-old Sergeant Samuel Doe took power ended well over a century of political dominance by the minority Americo-Liberians, the descendants of freed black slaves who had come from the US in the 1800s. Talbot's 9-year presidency was marked by growing dissatisfaction with the ethnic inequalities. His overthrow came at the start of a period of instability in Liberia, culminating in two devastating civil wars that finally ended in 2003. Doe himself met a violent death at the hands of rebels in 1990. His reburial in his hometown last week was also ordered by the president. Elsewhere, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS Commission, has expressed concern about the current state of affairs in Togo. Protests against the regime of Farouk Gensebe that involved a violent police response and saw at least 7 people die shook the country from the 26th through to the 28th of June. After refraining from commenting on the events while they took place, ECOWAS published a press release on social network X in the evening of July 1st in French and English. ECOWAS also noted that it remained available to contribute to efforts to preserve social peace in the Togolese Republic. Meanwhile, protesters took to the streets for the first time at the beginning of June to denounce a high cost of living and the concentration of power in the hands of Farouk Gensebe, who has been in office for the past 2 decades and succeeded his father Gensebe Ayandema at the helm of the state. In a rather sad development, civic rights groups say at least 7 people have been killed during a crackdown on protesters who were calling for Togo's leader Farouk Gensebe to step down and release political prisoners. 7 bodies were recovered from rivers in the capital city, Lomé, according to a coalition called Le Front Citoyen Togo Deboer, which accuses security forces and militias of committing abuses. The Togolese government has denied these deaths were linked to last week's demonstrations. It is now threatening legal action against the protest organizers, calling the protest a campaign of disinformation and hatred that was orchestrated from abroad. There is growing anger in Togo due to a crackdown on critical voices and changes to the constitution, labeled by critics and opposition figures as an institutional coup d'etat. These protests comes weeks after Gensebe, who was president for 2 decades and whose family has ruled the country for 58 years, was sworn into a new post of president of the Council of Ministers, which has no official term limits. Meanwhile, demonstrations have been banned in the West African country since 2022, with the authorities citing security reasons. Away from that, the European Union Migration Commissioner Magnus Brunner said that the EU would take a firm approach with Libyan authorities following a rise in illegal migration across the Mediterranean. Reports say in the first 2 months of 2025, the central Mediterranean route linking North Africa to Europe saw a 48% increase in illegal border crossings compared to 2024. Magnus Brunner plans to travel to Libya next week with government representatives from Greece, Italy, and Malta. He discussed the upcoming visit in a meeting with Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis in Athens. The European delegation will demand tougher measures from Libyan authorities to stop boats carrying migrants from leaving for Europe. Brunner said the delegation will meet both the United Nations recognized government in Western Libya and a rival authority led by warlord Khalifa Haftar in the east of the country. In a separate development, a military helicopter operated by the African Union crashed and caught fire Wednesday at the airport in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, killing at least 3 people, according to Somali authorities. The helicopter was arriving from Beldog airfield in the lower Shahabelle region in southern Somalia with 8 people on board. The helicopter originally belonged to the Ugandan Air Force but was being operated by the African Union peacekeeping mission, said Athen Mohammed, who leads the immigration office at Mogadishu's Aden Abduli Airport. According to Mohammed, the crash occurred at around 7:30 a.m. The exact number of casualties remains unclear. At least three people have been confirmed dead. A Ugandan army spokesperson Felix Kuyagi said three people had escaped the helicopter with burns and that the remaining five passengers were yet to be accounted for. We'll take a quick break now, and when we return, we'll bring you the rest of the stories in Spotlight Africa. Stay with us. Tuned in now to the concluding stories of Spotlight Africa. In Zimbabwe, a court has dismissed an opposition bid to block public hearings into the Gurukuhundi massacres, an episode in the 1980s during which thousands were killed by elite troops under then President Robert Mugabe. The Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU, argued the process lacks impartiality and legal legitimacy as it is led by traditional chiefs, but the Bulawayo High Court ruled the challenge was not urgent and came too late. The hearings by President Emerson Mnangagwa helps himself, a former security minister during the era, aimed to promote truth, reconciliation, and healing in communities affected by the killings, especially in Matabele and the Midlands. Victims group welcomes the move as a long overdue chance for justice and public acknowledgement, while Zapu remains critical, saying the model silences perpetrators and risks whitewashing history. The government insists the process is a vital step towards national unity. Away from that, Mali's armed forces say they have killed 80 Al Qaeda linked militants following a series of simultaneous and coordinated attacks on military posts in central and western parts of the country. Officials say the attacks took place in seven towns and cities near the border with Senegal and further north close to the frontier with Mauritania. The army made this statement during a special bulletin broadcast on the Armed Forces television channel. Meanwhile, the jihadist Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin group claimed responsibility for what it called coordinated and high-quality attacks and said it had taken control of three army barracks. Regional authorities in Kayes and Diola introduced a 30-day overnight curfew on Tuesday due to attacks against positions in the Kais region. In another development, Cameroon's long serving president Paul Biya is facing growing questions about his political future as the second high profile government official steps into the race to succeed him ahead of the country's October 2025 election. Tourism Minister Bello Boba Magari, a veteran politician and former prime minister, has accepted his party's nomination to run for president. The 78-year-old was officially backed by the National Union for Democracy and Progress, UNDP, over the weekend, a move that has stirred political speculation, especially since he has not resigned from his cabinet post. Maigari's entry into the race follows that of Issa Roma Bakari, another northern political heavyweight and former government spokesperson who recently stepped down to launch his presidential campaign. These developments hint at cracks within the ruling elite and a potential shift in the political alliance between Bia's central power base and the country's northern regions. President Bia, now 92 and in office since 1982, has not announced whether he intends to run for another term. His silence is filling uncertainty in a country where political succession has long been a taboo subject. Elsewhere, the situation of Sudanese refugees in neighboring Chad is reaching a breaking point as the number of arrivals in the country increases, humanitarian actors warned. Chad hosts a quarter of the 4 million refugees who fled the Sudanese civil war since April 2023. An additional 80,000 people left Sudan in the past 2 months after armed groups attacked displacement camps in North Darfur, according to NGO Doctors Without Borders. These assaults have killed more than 300 civilians as of the 3rd of June, according to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The UN Refugee Agency said most of the newly arrived people in Chad had suffered violence, with 72% reporting serious human rights violations, including physical and sexual violence, arbitrary detention, and forced recruitment. We move now to Kenya, where vendors shot in the head by police during protests 2 weeks ago has died a day after being declared brain dead in hospital. Boniface Kariuki was shot as police cracked down on a protest in the capital, Nairobi, against the death in detention of blogger and teacher Albert Owang, 31. Karaoke, a mask vendor, was shot at close range on 17 June and later admitted to the main public referral hospital in Nairobi for treatment. He spent nearly 2 weeks on a life support machine before his family were told by doctors that his heart was still beating, but his brain had ceased to function. Doctors had carried out several operations, but some bullet fragments were reportedly still lodged in his brain. News that he was brain dead had sparked further public anger over alleged police brutality, with increasing demands for justice. Many Kenyans have also urged the government to settle the hospital bill after Karaoke's family had appealed for public donations. Lastly, on Spotlight Africa, the signing of a peace agreement between the governments of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda in Washington has elicited mixed reactions, with the former Congolese President Joseph Kabila describing it as nothing more than a trade agreement. The deal signed on Friday demanded the disengagement, disarmament, and conditional integration of armed groups fighting in eastern DR Congo, but offered few other details. While some, including Kabila, have been critical, others have hailed the agreement as a turning point in a devastating conflict that has dragged on for decades. Rwanda has denied allegations it backs an armed group known as M23, which has been fighting in the eastern DR Congo. The conflict escalated earlier this year when M23 rebels seized control of large parts of eastern DR Congo, including regional capital Goma, the city of Bukavu, and two airports. The United Nations says thousands of people have been killed and hundreds of thousands of civilians forced from their homes following the recent rebel offensive. The M23 disputes the figures, saying fewer than 1,000 people have died. After the loss of territory, DR Congo's government turned to the US for help, reportedly offering access to critical minerals in exchange for security guarantees. Eastern DR Congo is rich in coltan and other resources vital to the global electronics industry. And that's what we have today on Spotlight Africa, bringing you news all around the continent. This has been put together by Spectrum Television. Do well to follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find at spectrumtvlive.ng. My name is Uyai Imam. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good afternoon.